Welcome back to Education System Reboot. I thought today, first of all, I'll just preface this all by saying what I'm going to talk about today is just something that I'm not fully developed, but it's just something that I think that I need to kind of get out first and foremost. Hopefully I'll come back and develop this better. But a little background. So I was, again, through my development, I'm always kind of looking on YouTube for things that are going to help my personal growth. And I came across a channel by a guy named Thomas Franks, or Thomas Frank, I think it's not plural. And he seems to be a time management, personal growth, success principles YouTube channel. And I really liked his videos. The reason I bring this up is I was watching one. I wrote this down. I want to make sure I do it. He was talking about, it was something from about right when the pandemic happened. He was talking about working from home and improving your planning your day, basically. And as I was watching it, he talked about Trello boards. Now, if you know what Trello boards are, awesome. And side note, we were introduced to these 4 years ago in my district. And first and foremost, at the time, I'll be honest, I didn't like the concept of them because it just seemed cumbersome. Hopefully, as I go through this story, I'll come back to the Trello. But the Trello board is an important part of this, of kind of outlining this video today. I also, though, will tie in the idea of professional development and just some advice or just some thoughts on kind of when professional development is planned, and just maybe perspective from, a teacher who's on the receiving end of professional development. Okay, so hopefully I set the stage a little bit of some things. All right, so let me try to unpack this and begin with these thoughts. So way back when, during a professional development session, we were introduced to the concept of a Trello board, and and it was this idea of tracking moving parts of a project. And although when I first saw it, it kind of made sense to me, I wasn't on this personal growth journey. So all I remember thinking is, oh, great, another thing that they're going to introduce for professional development that I'm not going to use. What's the point of this? Why? Just why? That was my thought, And if I come back from the lens of now, where I'm at now, I would have embraced it 100%, because what I would have seen was a system for organization. Okay. Now, throw the Trello board back in the back of your mind for a sec. So the first thing I want to talk about is just, I think most professional development, at least in the education setting, is similar, where we throw out these concepts of something. It could be anything. It could be the Trello board. It could be social emotional learning. It could be something that our administration thinks is a good idea. And they probably are all good ideas, okay? The fundamental flaw that I'm going to talk about here is the idea of, okay, so most of my channel has been about kind of retooling, rebooting the education system. And I'm hyper-focused in my idea of systems, building systems, which these systems lead to building habits. The habits, consistent effort over time equals success. Another thing I'm really fond of saying is, you are the sum total of your habits. So what I guess I want to point out is I believe the majority of human beings do not have amazing systems built into their lives to build new habits, right? Because we all struggle with habits. So if we assume that anything introduced in professional development is something that is going to require us to learn a new habit to be able to implement it, this is where my advice to administrators: you need to build in the amount of time needed to master the skill. When we teach, we present information, but we are assuming that the student has all the necessary habits and skills to take that information and learn what they need to learn from it, right? Study skills, habit skills. But what I have been proposing or saying a lot in this channel is that is a false premise, that the majority of students, do not have good habits when it comes to self-discipline, to prioritizing things, study habits, building new habits, knowing how to plan something, how to sequence it themselves. And so again, if we tie in, on one hand, education, how we teach to students, and then how administrators teach to the teachers, I think we would see a very similar process, or lack of process is a better way to say it, when we're presenting professional development. So again, like I said, I might be all over the board. I hope you can follow me. I try to do a really good job of bringing things back, but sometimes I go off on tangents. Okay, so now I'm taking a breath for myself, and I'm going to try to, again, everything I've said, kind of bring it back and then unpack it more. When an administrator presents something that is important to them, my hope would be that they understand, number one, that developing anything of purpose, anything at a high level is going to take time, effort, consistent effort, right? Daily interaction. And so if an administrator says, we're going to do this route, but does not provide the resources, the training, the amount of time needed. Now, I'll even say, obviously there's financial constraints. I get that. We are always talking about budgets and not being enough, blah, blah, blah. But this kind of goes back to something I think I've said before, I've hinted at, and so I'm going to say it here. I am of full belief that if you want to help your teachers, administrators, if you want to help your teachers be successful, you need to live within whatever system you believe is the system, right? Whether that's the daily schedule, whether that's a prioritization of certain things above all, but you need to do that for about 5 years. Okay, instead of changing year after year, because what happens in the daily grind of teaching is, I believe I'm using the plural, we do not have the necessary time in the daily grind to build the proper habits to get successful at the level that administrators would want. Then add on top of that, every year changing some new policy, changing some new schedule, changing some new expectations, some new bureaucracy, whatever. The constant yearly or monthly or weekly, whatever changes that we try to do to adapt, those create a lack of consistency. So again, I know this is really kind of about professional development, but it's also a little bit about just the advice I would give to administrators. Or another way to say it, if I happen to be an administrator for some reason, if I got put in that position, how would I try to structure, okay, to help my teachers or my people below me, because it could be in another job or whatever. I would want to create a consistency in their life so that they could count on what was to come, so they could build the necessary systems for themselves, or I would hopefully provide a system that would teach it to them, right? I'm a very hands-on learner. That's like probably why I'm a musician, is the art of practicing, the process of practicing over time is what allows me to come up with new ideas, new concepts, figure out what works and what doesn't work. But the pace of education, the pace of bureaucracy tends to not keep this in mind. And then here's the tie-in to education as a general. I believe we tend to teach that exact same way. We just throw out information just like our administrators throw out to us, expecting us to know how to handle all of it. But without the proper training, without the proper foundation, right, then we are not going to be successful. So again, I guess I look at this as a way of kind of saying, all right, so if you are an administrator and you are creating professional development opportunities for your teachers, I feel like you have to have a longer term approach. I feel like, again, we tend to just throw things out, like I said, and we assume that as adults, right, the adults can handle all these changes. And again, self-confession, I'll admit it. Again, this is me falling short. Whenever there's something new that's presented, I'm literally asking myself, what is the least path of least resistance to give them what they want, so that I don't have to spend the necessary time and energy to work through something. I will do the minimum when it comes to this, right? Number one, I would say you need to show me how this is going to help my teaching, so that if I decide to put in the time to actually develop the habit for whatever that purpose is, right, then I need to know the relevance. I need to know why it's going to help me. I need to understand systems that's going to allow me to not change my world and be able to focus on that. Could that literally mean that I'm going to get paid? Like, just throwing examples out there. Maybe an administrator say, hey, we're going to spend 2 weeks before school. You're going to get paid, and we're going to drill this, and we're going to make sure that you have learned this fully. And we're going to hyper focus, and we're going to develop a habit over 2 weeks. I would say, what, I get paid and you're going to show me how this works? Like, all right, I can do that. But if the expectation is the reverse, where it's like, we're going to throw this out, you're expected to do this, we're not going to give you any training, any resources, you better do it on your own, you're going to get frustration from your teachers. Now, I say all this, again, to go back to the Trello board, okay? Because in my own experience, I was introduced to this, but I didn't have an idea how this could help my teaching. Now, fast forward to where I am now, I look back and I go, man, I really wish I had developed a use for that Trello board. I probably could have been a better teacher had I seen the value of it, right? Maybe that's another way to phrase it. Administrators, we've got to see the value in what you're presenting for us to want to not uproot our whole life, but uproot our teaching system, right? Because every new thing is going to put a strain on whatever system we have. And too many changes creates frustration. I just know this. Or I should say, this has been my experience. And most of where I struggle personally in the education system is not in the teaching of my subject. It's in the bureaucracy that's put on top of me. And like I said, this is not to say that I have had bad administrators, good administrators. It's just a general observation. I've actually been very lucky. I've had, for the most part, very competent administrators, but I think administrators have a different mindset. And I guess this is the whole point of this video would be more to just say, administrators, I don't envy your task. I do not want your job, but I do think we can lose perspective as we move from level to level in whatever organization we are. It gets harder to remember where you came from. It gets harder to remember the daily things that we go through. And like I said, I think that our ability to recognize that the simplicity of the learning structure, which is a good system, right? The ability to implement a system and be consistent over time. I'm going to go back to that 5-year idea, right? So this is another thing I guess I want to just unpack here. I've had this hypothesis that if you want to see change in your system or in your system, in your area, in your building, in your district, whatever, don't change anything for 5 years. Let the system work, right? Now, encourage all your teachers to improve their individual system in their class, and really, but give them the framework and the what's a good word? Not framework, but give them the ability to know that things are not going to change. The rug's not going to be pulled out from under them. If they have an idea and they move it, the structure won't change. Now, is that easier said than done? Of course, or it's way easier said than done. But I kind of believe, again, if we're looking for ways to change and improve the educational system across the board, we need to have some kind of hard and fast rules in our system that aren't going to change. We're always looking for the quick fix. And I think this is where professional development, again, sometimes for different teachers, depending on their subject, feels like a waste of time. Because number one, it's like, well, they're going to just come up with some other different thing that they think works. They're looking for a Band-Aid. They're looking for some magic pill. And this is the whole reason I'm making this channel is there is no magic pill. There is no quick fix. There is no Staples easy button. The only thing there is time-tested success principles. And they have been time-tested. Every time I read a book about someone who's made something successful, every time I watch a video that talks about the story of someone who made it in their genre or in their area of expertise, it all comes down to this idea of consistent effort over time equals success. At least that's the interpretation that I have taken away from it. So again, I know this was maybe a little disjunct, and I really apologize for it not being as clear and thought out. But again, a lot of why I'm doing this channel isn't necessarily for me to just present some magic thing. I'm still weeding this out. I'm still figuring it out. I have a tendency to have it, overthink it in here, and then not get it out into the public sphere. Because again, I want to introduce the idea of ideas. So here comes again, if I was teaching this as a lesson, I would try to kind of check for understanding, and then I'd come back and kind of summarize. So the point, again, to hopefully make this a quick summary. If you're an administrator and you're watching this, my best piece of advice is just to remember that if we do not get the proper resources to develop the habit and make it internalize whatever you want out of your teachers, you're probably going to not see the results you want. We have to remember the learning process is always at work. The learning process is, at first, it's hard, right? You might think as an administrator, this is a simple thing I'm presenting, but it's not necessarily easy, because what you're doing is you're asking every person to change whatever system to accommodate this new information. And for some people, it'll be easy depending on what what they have done in their life, what background they have, what habits, what systems. For others, it could be a devastating change, and it will be hard for them to change. So without the given amount of time, right, and the consistent effort, and then to recap, again, I would highly suggest that one of the things that would help all teachers is a sense that nothing is going to change in terms of the schedule, in terms of the expectations, in terms of systems that we do for 5 years. I really think 5 to 10 years, honestly, because it's the idea of consistent effort over time. All these books, all these things I'm reading, they talk about, the compound effect, the idea that it's always slower than we want at first. Always. I mean, I think there's no exception. It's always a little bit harder than we predicted, right? And then all of a sudden, if you're consistent, it just snowballs, right? I don't think we give ourselves enough time to let things work, right? I'll end with this. I just literally watched the movie Moneyball. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it illustrates this perfectly, okay? That sabermetrics was this idea, again, if no one's seen it, of statistical analysis to break down players in baseball. Instead of just looking at them like a scout would look and try to assess, they would actually let the numbers do the talking. And so what would happen is, they could change this. And so what happened in 2002, somewhere around there, the Oakland Athletics adopted this system, and they had a very successful season. But at first, in Moneyball, they showed how it was a horrific beginning. But they didn't waver. They let it work over time. And all of a sudden, they had a 20-game winning streak. They won their division. Obviously, they didn't win the World Series or anything, but it fundamentally changed how the game of baseball was played, how it was analyzed, and now everyone does it, right? Now, am I Billy Beane from that movie? Absolutely not. I don't know. But I've said this in multiple videos. I can't unsee what I've seen. I can't unsee the connections that are being made as I grow and I look at a system that I love. I love learning. That's another thing. I love teaching. I hate the bureaucracy of our system. It is broken, and we need to fix it. And the best I can offer is to offer ideas, solutions, thoughts, feelings, insights, whatever, and hope that somebody out there goes, that's a good idea, right? That's the sabermetrics. That's the Moneyball idea, And like I said, I would have never, how do I put this? I would have probably never even thought of doing this channel if I hadn't decided to grow and to be okay with daring greatly. That's another book I've read by Brene Brown. So anyway, this is just a plug for personal growth as well. All right, so I'll end there. I know I'm coming up on 17 minutes or almost 18 minutes. Thank you again. If you end up watching this, again, none of this was to judge people that are in the hardest jobs ever. I would never want to be an administrator, but it would just be a piece of advice, that I could offer. So if any of this made sense, I appreciate your time, your energy. The education system's important. We need to make it the best it can. And that's the whole point of this. And of course, remember, consistent effort over time equals success. Have a great day, night, morning, whenever you end up watching this.